Digging in the Dirt with Dr. David Lipovich.
Welcome to the 5th episode of Digging in the Dirt entitled On the Hunt. The new, more modern Homo sapiens that arrived in the Near East about 70,000 years ago are our direct ancestors. All of the subsequent people and cultures of the Near East can trace their descent directly back to these early migrants looking for better economic opportunities as climate change begins to affect their day-to-day lives. Unfortunately, we do not have a lot of evidence for the earliest stages of their arrival in the Near East. About the earliest evidence we have so far comes from the site of Ksar Akil, not far from modern Beirut. Ksar Akil is believed to date to about 45,000 years ago. The site is best known for the presence there of a new type of stone flake tool that has been named after the site. The Ksar Akil flake is an oval flake of flint modified to have a sawtooth edge. Among the other finds were shells that had been used as pendants or beads, making the inhabitants the earliest users of personal ornamentation. The complete skeleton of an 8-year-old Homo sapiens was found among the more recent finds at the site. As we get closer to the present time, more options become available to us for dating archaeological remains. Probably the best known such method is radiocarbon dating. Radiocarbon dating, often called carbon dating or carbon-14 dating, can be used to measure the age of any organic artifact by measuring the ratio of a radioactive isotope of carbon, carbon-14, to the more common non-radioactive carbon-12 and carbon-13. Radiocarbon dating is based on the fact that as long as an organism is alive, it takes in radioactive carbon-14 alongside the other carbon isotopes in the air in the same ratio as exists naturally in our atmosphere. After death, however, no new carbon is consumed. As an artifact lies buried, the carbon-14 atoms decay at a constant and known rate over time, while the other non-radioactive isotopes of carbon remain constant. As a result, there is a changing ratio of carbon-14 to carbon-12 and 13 in the formerly living organic matter. That rate of change is determined by the half-life of carbon-14, which is 5,730 plus or minus 40 years. By measuring the ratio of these carbon isotopes, it is possible to date an artifact so long as it once was alive, so it needs to be made of bone or wood or at least contain organic material, and it is more recent than about 60,000 years ago, beyond which there is so little carbon-14 left in an artifact that it becomes near impossible to date it using this technique. Early Homo sapien remains or artifacts associated with this late stage of the Old Stone Age have been found at Adlun, dated to 72,000 years ago, and Meruba in Lebanon, Yafte in western Iran, dated to between 30,000 and 25,000 years ago, Nazlet Khater, once the site of one of the world's earliest underground mining pits in Upper Egypt, dated to about 30,000 years ago, in addition to sites like Ksar Akil. With modern humans now having made their way into the Near East, bringing with them new technology and ways of living, thanks to our capacity for complex thought and speech, we now move into a new era that archaeologists refer to as the Epipaleolithic. It's basically a fancy way of saying the end of the Old Stone Age. While evidence exists throughout much of the ancient Near East for Epipaleolithic hunter-gatherers, the southern Levant has been the most thoroughly investigated region and therefore is the best understood. These hunter-gatherers focused on hunting, gazelles, wild equids, the ancestors of horses and donkeys, wild boar, red, roe, and fallow deer, aurochsen, giant wild cattle with attitude, that's the skeleton of one you see there, and various goat and sheep-like animals like ibex, wild sheep, and wild goats. Wild sheep and goats were particularly important sources of meat for those populations living in the foothills of the Zagros and Taurus mountain ranges. These hunted animals were supplemented as a food source by the collection of various cereals and pulses, including wild peas, wild emmer wheat, and wild barley. A very important site for the understanding of the Epipaleolithic is Ohalo II, dated to 19,500 years ago, about the same time as the most recent glacial maximum. on the shore of the Sea of Galilee in northern Israel. The site has been submerged underwater and exhibited as a result phenomenal preservation for its age, including evidence for what had been semi-subterranean thatch huts, hearths or fireplaces, middens, kitchen garbage deposits, and charred plant remains. During this period, the first evidence for a new stone tool technology is seen based on the manufacture of what are known as microliths. Microliths are a small stone tool, usually made of flint, that are about 1 centimeter in length and about 1/2 centimeter wide. These microliths can be used for cutting, scraping, drilling, or for use as spear points. The earliest of these microlithic industries is called the Kebaran, after the site of Kebara Cave in Israel, where it was first identified. This industry has been dated to the period between 20,000 and 14,000 years ago. It is found in coastal regions and oases throughout the southern Levant, but only appears at the later end of this time frame in the Negev and Sinai deserts. A key Kebaran site is Ein Gev 1 in northern Israel, where evidence for wigwam-like structures was found that were probably used as houses. Around 14,500 years ago, as the climate improved and the continental glaciers began to melt in Europe and local conditions became wetter, the population was able to expand into formerly arid regions which had now become steppe-like. Alongside the expansion into new regions of the Near East, there are changes in the stone tool technology. These new developments are referred to as the geometric Kebaran industry, since it is based on the Kebaran microlithic industry, but now includes a more diverse array of shapes, including half-moons or lunates, trapezoids, and triangles, created using something called the microburin technique. The microburin technique consists of taking a long blade made out of the flint that has been already knocked off of its core, taking that blade, placing its upper end against a support, and using another tool like a piece of antler or wood, making a notch which is enlarged until the blade snaps. If the technique is carried out effectively, it results in two different pieces. The smaller microburin, what you see there on the very far left, and a second piece called the trihedral apex, which is sort of trapezoidal. The trihedral apex then becomes the raw material used for the manufacture of the geometric microliths. So triangles, as you can see in the middle there, trapezoids like the one at the top right, or half-moon shapes like you see on the bottom right. This new technique resulted in a more diverse and, as a result, more regionalized set of related stone tool styles or industries. While there is at best minimal evidence for the use of sickle blades made out of these microliths that were used for harvesting wild grasses, there is definitely evidence for an increase in plant use seen in the appearance of stone mortars and pestles and other grinding tools that were needed to process some of the gathered plant materials into a more edible form. Settlements appear to be seasonal at this time rather than permanent, with summer camps in the highlands and winter sites in valleys. At Ha'on 3 in Israel, evidence was found for semi-subterranean huts, while in the more desert regions, the only evidence of occupation is in the form of hearths and scatters of stone tools. In those areas which were still more arid, such as southern Jordan and the Negev and Sinai deserts, regional variations are seen that are referred to as the Mushabian and then later the Ramonian stone tool industries. The Mushabian has similarities with tool industries found in North Africa, and it was thought for a great deal of time that the industry found in the Sinai and Negev was derived from these North African traditions. But recent finds at sites like Gilat near Azraq in Jordan suggest that, in fact, the tool industries that we find in North Africa are actually derivative of the Mushabian and Ramonian industries of the southern Levant. In our next episode, entitled Village Green, we enter into our very own geological epoch, the Holocene, with the end of the last great ice age. In the Near East, we see the first appearance of village-based life, and start to enter a way of living that is at least reminiscent of the way that much of the world of the modern Middle East lives today.
If you are enjoying Digging in the Dirt and would like to help us continue to produce more episodes, please spread the word about our series and send us a small gratuity to show your support using the following link, tinyurl.com/3rxdkvt4.